Hey everybody! Are you looking for a dish that's going to make you a whole bunch of new friends at the next potluck or party you go to? Homemade tamales is going to do the trick every time. Well, today I'm putting together tamales with two very simple and very delicious fillings that everyone's going to love. So let's get started. Now the first thing to do is to get our dried corn husks soaking in some water. These need to soak for several hours or up to overnight. Now I'm using this container because it has a top that I can put on here and make sure that these corn husks stay submerged in the water, but any container you can get these guys into and keep them under the water is going to work just fine. You'll see they want to float up on you, and that's why you want a way to keep them submerged entirely under the water. And like I said, with this one, I could just pop the lid on and we're good to go. And I'll just set those aside and we can get to work on our fillings. I've got a nice 3.5 pound piece of chuck roast today, and I really like to use cuts from the chuck because that nice fat marbling in there makes them really good for slow cooking. You've probably all had some shredded beef that's a little tough and a little dry, and that's usually going to come from using leaner cuts, like cuts from the round. And you get that stuff swimming around in enough sauce, and it's really good, and certainly more healthy than this. But I'm making tamales today, so health is really not my number one concern. And this nice marbling in here is going to make sure that this stays nice and tender and juicy, and the texture of that's really going to go well with the masa in our tamales. So the first thing I'm going to do is get the bones out of this and cut this into some sort of 1.5 or 2-inch cubes. I'm making a very simplified version of this beef today. It's still going to taste great, but I'm not going to be starting with these dried chili pods like I normally do, because that's just going to take too much time and effort. Instead, I've got an already prepared red chili sauce. I think you could probably use enchilada sauce here too. And I'm just going to add some tomato sauce and some spices to this to keep this real easy. Let's put this sauce together. I'll start with the 28-ounce can of red chili sauce. And this is going to be way more sauce than I need, but I'll use it for a lot of other things. It's great for cooking some chicken or pork in anything. Now, I've got one 14.5-ounce can of regular stewed tomatoes that I've strained most of the liquid off. Half an onion. I'm going to cut that in a little smaller bits. That'll make it easier to blend down. I've got about 4 cloves of garlic, 1 tablespoon of freshly ground cumin, and a tablespoon of dried Mexican oregano. Now I'll just throw in a nice big pinch of salt, and we'll wazz that down into a nice smooth puree. Yeah, I'll give that a taste. Yeah. So now I've seasoned my meat up a little bit with just some salt. I'm going to put a bit of the sauce down into the bottom of the pot. See, it's nice and hot already. That's not even important. Now I'm just going to nestle my pieces of meat down into that sauce. I'm going to throw some more of the sauce over the top. I'm not going to completely submerge that, because a lot of juice is going to come out of that meat too. And I want a nice concentrated flavor. Now I'm just going to throw in a nice bay leaf, because that's what you do. Stir this around to get everything coated. Now I've got this up to temp, and I'm going to reduce it down to a nice low simmer. I'm going to cover that up, and I'm just going to let that cruise for 2 or 3 hours until it's nice and soft and shreds real easily. I'm going to be cooking the chicken filling today in a beautiful green sauce, or salsa verde. And when I make it homemade, I'll take some nice tomatillos and some serrano peppers and onions, and I'll either roast those real hot in the oven or char them up on the grill, and then puree them with some garlic and a little salt, and that is a beautiful sauce for cooking or using as a condiment. However, when you do that, what you essentially get is this. Now, your homemade's going to be better, of course, because of the love, but this works really great for the simplified recipe. You can use any salsa verde. You just want to make sure the number one ingredient is tomatillos and not green pepper or something, or that flavor's not going to be quite right. You want a tomatillo-based salsa verde for that authentic flavor. Now, just like the beef recipe, this chicken filling recipe is so simple and so delicious, and you can use it for making tamales, tacos, burritos, whatever you like. It's so easy, you're going to want to make it all the time. And so I'm starting with just some boneless, skinless chicken thighs. I got about 2 pounds of them here, and I'm going to cut those into some nice chunks. Some are going to be in halves and some quarters because they come in all different sizes, but just some nice manageable chunks here. It depends on the size of the shred you want, right? So just kind of keep that in mind as you're cutting it. And now I'm going to season those a bit with some salt. And it's just that easy. I've got my pan heating up a little bit. You could actually start this in a cold pan. It doesn't really matter. I'm just going to put a little of that sauce down like I did with the beef, and just toss my chicken in there. And I know some of you are out there saying, oh, you gotta sear the meat, but I'm here to tell you, you don't. In fact, in a lot of cultures, that is never done. It's really good, it adds another level of flavor, but certainly not mandatory. So now I'm gonna add a little more of that sauce. Again, I don't want to cover it in sauce, so I got about 1.5 cups or so in there. And normally you'd add some powdered chicken bouillon here, and I don't have any, so I'm just going to use about a teaspoon, maybe a little more of the wet kind. Now this would be good to go as it is, but for my own personal taste, I do like to add about a teaspoon of that fresh ground cumin in there. Give it a little pop. And now I'll bring this up to a boil. Again, reduce it down to a low simmer and let that cruise for 45 minutes to an hour is usually pretty good for these chicken thighs. After an hour, this is looking real good. You can just kind of push the fork in there, and that shreds real nice and easy. The sauce is thickened up to about how I like it, so everything's going to be nice and sauce, but not runny at all. So I could shred this all up right now, but it's got to be completely cooled before I stuff my tamales anyway, so I'm just going to let this cool down and shred it all by hand. Oh, that looks great. Smells good too. So, I think that should be fairly easy to shred now. Oh yeah, it comes right apart. Beautiful. So I'm going to scoop the meat out of the sauce here, and then I'm actually gonna reduce the sauce down a little bit just by simmering it without the lid on for another 10 minutes or so and get it nice and thick and rich. And then I'll put the meat back in there, let the whole thing cool down, and we'll get to stuffing our tamales. Let's put together the masa dough, and the consistency is really going to be somewhere between a dough and a batter. And the first thing I want to do is whip 2 cups of lard until it's kind of light and fluffy. You could use shortening for this too if you're making a vegetarian tamal, but the lard is traditional and I really like the flavor. So it's about room temperature, it's kind of soft already, and I'm going to take my mixer and beat that until it fluffs up nice. It's going to take a little while. There we go. That only took a few minutes, and now you can see it's nice, it's light and fluffy. It's almost like a meringue now. And so we're ready to add in the maseca. I'm using maseca instant masa today, and I'm going to add in 6 cups of this, loosely measured. And now I'll add in 2 teaspoons of baking powder. Nice big pinch of salt. That's a couple of teaspoons. And now I'll mix this all together. And now that this is starting to get mixed together, I'm going to begin adding in some chicken broth. I've got about 2 cups here. I'm not going to add it all at once. I'm going to add about half of it and mix it, and then I'll add enough to get to the consistency I want. That looks good. That was about 2.5 cups of the broth. And it's like a very thick cake batter. Now we'll get a little taste of that and check it for seasoning. And I'm going to add another big pinch of salt to that. And I'll just mix that in too. Okay, now I'm going to take out just about half of that. Ooh. And now all I'm going to do is add in some of that red sauce that I used for preparing the meat. And I'm just going to give this a little flavor and a little color too. And now for the chicken ones, I'm going to add in the rest of that green sauce I have. It's not much, maybe 1/4 cup at the most. And this is not traditional, but it's going to taste good. And being creative in the kitchen is what this channel is all about. Now, I don't have a dedicated steamer big enough to handle this batch of tamales, but I do have a nice old metal colander and a stock pot that it nests into pretty darn well. And so it sits about 3 inches above the bottom, which is good. So I will put about 2 inches of water in there, and when I fill this up, I'll just seal this all up with foil to get a nice tight seal. Now, when you go to assemble your tamales, you got your moistened corn husk, and you'll see that one side is kind of rough, that was the outside, and the other half's a little shinier, a little smoother, and that's the side you want to put your masa on to help keep it from sticking. Now, I like to take it, lay it on a flat surface, and then I get about, I don't know, 1/3 cup or so of the masa dough, a nice ball there, and then the damp hand, I like to just pat it all around until it's mostly spread out. And then I'll use some sort of spatula and spread it the rest of the way to get a nice even coat all over that corn husk. Now, this was a really big corn husk, so I'm not going to use the whole thing. I'll just pull that a little bit off the end, and then I'll just put in a small scoop close to the top, not all the way to the bottom. Just a couple of tablespoons of that filling because it's nice and strong flavor. And then very simply fold one side over, bring the other side over the top of that, kind of smooth them together, then fold the bottom up right over that. And that is a perfect little tamal. And now that goes into the steamer basket, and I'm going to whip up, another few dozen of those, and then we'll get to steaming them. Alright, I got my water heated up down in the stock pot. Drop my steamer basket on top. It's resting just above the level of the water. And now I'll cover this all up with some of the leftover corn husks. Make it nice and steamy inside of there. And since I don't have the proper lid for this, I'm just going to get a good seal of foil on there. I'll do a double layer, and that should keep it nice and steamy and not let my water evaporate out of there. Okay, now I'll get this over to the stovetop, get it boiling and steaming, and steam that at around medium-low heat for 2 hours. After 2 hours of steaming, these things are thoroughly cooked, but they're still very hot and kind of soft. So I'm going to carefully remove this foil, being sure not to get hit by any of that super hot steam. And then since I've got so many of them, I'm going to let these cool and firm up for an hour. let's see how we did. Let's get into that beef one. Oh my, that looks perfect. Let's give it a try. I don't know if there's anything more delicious you could put in your mouth than that right there. That beef is so nice and tender and flavorful, and the masa just melts in your mouth. It is fantastic. But I've got to try the chicken as well. Yeah. Oh. Unbelievable. Oh, the tartness from the green sauce. It is so savory and succulent. I can't really pick between the two. They're both incredible. It's sort of a special occasion dish, but it is well worth the effort. And these are great for sharing. Everybody loves them. Well, I really hope you give this a try. I know you're gonna love it. And if you do, please like and subscribe for more. Thanks for watching.